Trevor Ashford was 38, cocky, obsessed with his appearance, and had somehow convinced the company owners that he was a marketing genius. He wasn't. He was a narcissist who took credit for other people's work and spent most of his time taking selfies for social media and talking about his personal brand. Trevor ran our team of 8 account managers, and he managed through intimidation and humiliation. Every team meeting was basically a roast session where Trevor would pick someone to tear apart in front of everyone else. He called it constructive feedback, but it was really just him getting off on power. His favorite targets rotated, but for the past 2 years, his absolute favorite punching bag was James. James was 35, quiet, methodical, and the best account manager we had. Clients loved him because he actually listened and delivered results. But Trevor hated him for reasons I never fully understood. Maybe because James never kissed his ass, or maybe because James was genuinely competent and Trevor felt threatened. The bullying was constant and creative. Trevor would assign James impossible deadlines, then mock him in meetings when he asked for more time, take credit for James's successful campaigns while blaming him publicly for anything that went wrong, accidentally leave James out of important client meetings, then write him up for not being present, make racist comments disguised as jokes. James is Chinese-American, and Trevor thought Ching Chong impressions were hilarious. Cancel James's approved vacation days at the last minute, causing him to lose money on non-refundable bookings, give James the worst accounts, then criticize his numbers compared to people with better clients. The worst part was that James never fought back. He'd just take it with this blank expression, nod, and go back to his desk. Some people thought he was weak. I thought he was smart. Fighting Trevor directly would just make things worse. But HR was useless. Trevor was the golden boy who supposedly brought in big accounts. He didn't. His team did. And the owners loved him. Complaints went nowhere. I watched this go on for 2 years. James's life was clearly falling apart. He looked exhausted, he'd lost weight, his hair was going gray. A few of us tried to be supportive, but there wasn't much we could do except witness the abuse and feel bad about it. Then in January, something changed. Trevor made his biggest mistake. He got James fired. It wasn't a fair firing. Trevor had been building a case against James for months, documenting every tiny mistake, every time James pushed back on an unreasonable request, every client complaint, most of which Trevor had fabricated or exaggerated. He presented this file to the owners and demanded James be terminated for performance issues and unprofessional conduct. The owners, who trusted Trevor completely, approved it. James was called into a meeting on a Friday afternoon and told his position was being eliminated effective immediately. He was given 2-week severance and escorted out of the building. I'll never forget watching James pack up his desk. He was completely calm, almost serene. He shook hands with everyone, thanked us for working with him, and walked out with his box of belongings like he was going on vacation. Trevor was practically glowing. At happy hour that night, which James was obviously not invited to, Trevor got drunk and told everyone that he'd finally gotten rid of the dead weight and now our team could reach its full potential. What Trevor didn't know was that James hadn't been sitting passively for 2 years. He'd been documenting everything. And now that he had nothing left to lose, James was about to go nuclear. The Monday after James was fired, Trevor was in an exceptionally good mood. He strutted around the office like he'd won the Super Bowl, talking about his vision for the team's future and how removing toxic elements was going to transform our performance. That's when the email hit. It went to the entire company, all 150 employees across every department. The subject line was simple: a pattern of discrimination and harassment at Elevate Creative. The email was from James's personal account, and it was professional, detailed, and absolutely devastating. James laid out 2 years of documented harassment. He included screenshots of racist jokes Trevor had sent in Slack, including messages where Trevor called James the fortune cookie and made comments about his Chinese math skills.
recordings of team meetings where Trevor publicly humiliated James. Illinois is a one-party consent state, so this was legal. Documentation of the canceled vacation days with emails showing Trevor approved them, then revoked them. A spreadsheet comparing James's performance metrics to other team members, proving his numbers were actually better despite having worse accounts. Emails showing Trevor taking credit for James's work, including one campaign that won an industry award. Text messages between Trevor and other employees where Trevor specifically discussed trying to make James quit because he didn't fit the culture. But the real bombshell was what James included about Trevor's business practices. James had documented that Trevor was overbilling clients by inflating hours and adding fake expenses, taking kickbacks from vendors in exchange for steering company business their way, using company resources for his personal influencer brand, including having junior employees ghostwrite his LinkedIn posts during work hours, lying to the owners about account performance to make himself look better. James ended the email with, "I am not looking for money or reinstatement. I simply believe the company leadership should be aware of who they have entrusted with management responsibility. I have copies of all documentation and am prepared to provide it to anyone who requests it." The office went absolutely silent. You could hear people's keyboards clicking as everyone opened the email at the same time. Trevor's face went purple. He immediately started shouting that it was all lies, that James was a disgruntled ex-employee making things up, that he was going to sue James for defamation. But here's the thing. James had been so meticulous that there was no room for denial. Everything was time-stamped, verifiable, and damning. Within an hour, Trevor was called into a meeting with the owners in HR. He came out looking like he'd seen a ghost. He was told to go home while they investigated the allegations. The investigation took 3 days. They interviewed everyone on the team, pulled communication records, and reviewed financial documentation. Every single thing James had claimed checked out. Trevor was fired on Thursday. Not quietly either. The owner sent a company-wide email announcing his termination due to violations of company policy and ethical standards. We thought that was the end of it. We thought James had gotten his revenge. Trevor was fired, humiliated, and unemployable in the Chicago marketing scene. We had no idea James was just getting started.
After Trevor was fired, those of us who'd worked with James started piecing together what he'd been doing for the past 2 years. The guy had been playing 4D chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. A coworker named Maria, who'd stayed in touch with James, told us that the company email was just phase 1. James had been building cases on multiple fronts, and now that he'd lost his job anyway, he was activating all of them. Phase 2 hit about a week after Trevor's firing, the tax fraud investigation. Remember how James had documented Trevor overbilling clients and taking kickbacks? Well, James had also documented that Trevor wasn't reporting that income on his taxes. He'd been pocketing probably $50K plus per year in illegal kickbacks and not declaring any of it. James sent his documentation to the IRS with a detailed whistleblower report. The IRS doesn't mess around with tax fraud, especially when someone hands them a well-documented case on a silver platter. Within 2 weeks, Trevor received notice that he was being audited for the past 7 years. But James still wasn't done. Phase 3 was targeting Trevor's personal brand. Trevor had spent years building his LinkedIn presence, 30K plus followers, regular posts about leadership and marketing excellence, paid speaking gigs at conferences. His whole brand was built on being this marketing visionary and business success story. James created a detailed Medium article titled "The Real Trevor Ashford, a Case Study in Narcissism, Fraud, and Corporate Toxicity." It was written in an academic, analytical tone, not angry or emotional, but cold and factual. James laid out everything: the harassment, the fraud, the lies.
He included excerpts from the documentation with sensitive info redacted and analyzed Trevor's behavior as a textbook example of toxic leadership. The article went viral in marketing circles. It got shared on LinkedIn, Twitter, and in multiple industry Slack channels. Within days, Trevor Ashford was trending in marketing communities, and not in a good way. Companies started reaching out to Elevate Creative, asking if they'd been overbilled. Clients Trevor had personally managed requested audits of their accounts. Industry contacts who'd worked with Trevor started sharing their own stories of his dishonesty and narcissism. Trevor's LinkedIn went from carefully curated success story to ghost town. He deleted his account, but screenshots lived forever. His speaking engagements were canceled. A book deal he'd been working on about authentic leadership was dropped by the publisher. Maria told us that James had created a Google alert for Trevor's name and was systematically commenting or responding to every mention of Trevor online with links to the Medium article. Not in a harassing way, just making sure that anyone researching Trevor Ashford would find the truth. But Phase 4 was the most brutal.
Up until this point, James had focused on Trevor's professional life. But apparently Trevor had made one comment too many about James's personal life during those 2 years of bullying, and James decided turnabout was fair play. Trevor was married to a woman named Stephanie, who came from money. Her family owned a successful restaurant chain. They had 2 young kids and lived in an expensive condo in Lincoln Park. Trevor's whole lifestyle was funded by Stephanie's family money, not his marketing salary. Stephanie was one of those people who posted everything on social media. Instagram was her journal. Pictures of family dinners, vacation photos, date nights with Trevor, motivational quotes about marriage and parenting. What Stephanie didn't know was that Trevor had been having an affair for the past year with a 24-year-old junior designer at Elevate named Brittany. James knew because he'd seen them together. And being James, he'd documented it. Photos of Trevor and Brittany at restaurants, hotels, bars, always when Trevor had told Stephanie he was working late or traveling for business. After Trevor got fired and the tax investigation started, James sent everything to Stephanie. Not as a dump of photos, but as a carefully compiled timeline with dates, locations, and context. "I debated whether to share this with you," James wrote in his letter to Stephanie, "but I believe you deserve to know the truth about your husband's character. I'm sorry to be the bearer of this information, but I thought it would be worse for you to continue living in ignorance." Stephanie filed for divorce within a week, and because Illinois is not a no-fault divorce state if you can prove adultery, and because Stephanie's family had money for excellent lawyers, Trevor got absolutely destroyed in the divorce proceedings. Stephanie got primary custody of the kids, the condo, and a huge chunk of Trevor's future earnings. Trevor was left with his soon-to-be obsolete marketing skills and a rapidly growing pile of legal bills. But James still had one more move. Remember Brittany, the junior designer Trevor had been sleeping with? She was 24, fresh out of college, and Trevor had been her direct supervisor when the affair started. That's a clear violation of company policy and potentially a sexual harassment issue given the power dynamic. James had documentation showing that Trevor had promoted Brittany over more qualified candidates and given her preferential treatment, better assignments, higher bonuses, opportunities that others didn't get. James sent this documentation to Elevate's HR, along with a letter asking them to investigate whether other young female employees had been pressured into relationships with Trevor or denied opportunities because they refused his advances. The HR investigation uncovered 2 other women who came forward with stories about Trevor making unwanted advances. One had left the company rather than deal with his harassment. Elevate ended up settling with all 3 women and implementing new policies about supervisor-subordinate relationships. They also asked James to consult on their new anti-harassment training, which he did for a hefty consulting fee. So let's recap Trevor's situation at this point.
fired from his job and unemployable in Chicago marketing. Under IRS investigation for tax fraud, facing potential criminal charges. Public reputation destroyed, with his name permanently associated with toxicity and fraud. Divorced and paying substantial alimony and child support. Legal bills from multiple proceedings. His personal brand completely demolished. James had systematically dismantled every aspect of Trevor's life with the precision of a master strategist. But the final blow was still to come.
Three months after Trevor's firing, those of us still at Elevate were settling into life under new management. The new director was actually competent and treated people with respect. It was amazing what that did for morale. Maria was still in contact with James, who had landed a much better job at a competing agency. She told us James seemed happy and relaxed for the first time in years, like he'd been carrying a weight and finally put it down. Then one Friday afternoon, Maria texted me, "Turn on the news, Channel 7. I pulled it up on my phone. The headline was, "Local Marketing Executive Arrested in Multi-State Fraud Scheme." Trevor's face was on the screen. Turns out the IRS investigation had uncovered something bigger than just personal tax fraud. Trevor had been running a side business for years where he'd create fake marketing agencies, bill real clients for services, and pocket the money without actually providing the services. He'd used his legitimate agency connections to find clients, then would create contracts under fake company names, deliver subpar work or sometimes no work, and disappear before clients realized they'd been scammed. He'd been doing this in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. The total fraud was estimated at over $400,000 across multiple victims. Turns out James had known about this too. He'd found evidence of it buried in Trevor's work files and had been sitting on it, waiting for the right moment. When the IRS started investigating Trevor's personal taxes, James reached out to provide them with additional information that might be relevant to their investigation. He handed them a complete case showing Trevor's fraud scheme, victim names, fake companies, payment records, everything. The IRS passed it to the FBI, who arrested Trevor on federal fraud charges. Trevor was looking at 10 to 20 years in prison. His lawyer managed to negotiate a plea deal where Trevor got 8 years, but he'd serve at least 6 before being eligible for parole. Before sentencing, Trevor tried one last desperate move. He attempted to pin some of the fraud on James, claiming James had been complicit or had helped him set up the fake companies. Bad move. James had documentation proving he'd discovered the fraud, reported concerns to HR, which were ignored, and had no involvement in any of Trevor's schemes. James's lawyer, yes, James had lawyered up the moment he was fired, threatened to sue Trevor for defamation and harassment. Trevor backed down. At Trevor's sentencing hearing, the judge allowed victim impact statements. 3 former clients spoke about how Trevor's fraud had damaged their businesses. One small business owner talked about how losing $50,000 to Trevor's fake agency scam had almost bankrupted him. James was in the courtroom. He didn't give a statement, but Maria said he made sure Trevor saw him there, watching. After Trevor was led away to begin his sentence, James walked out of the courthouse and went back to his new job, where he was thriving and respected. Trevor is currently serving 6 years. And when he gets out, he's barred from working in marketing or any position of financial responsibility. His kids barely speak to him, while his ex-wife is now dating someone else. Trevor's name is permanently associated with fraud and toxicity in our industry. James, meanwhile, is now a senior director at one of the top agencies in Chicago. He's respected, successful, and mentored several young professionals who were dealing with toxic bosses. He's come a something of a legend in Chicago marketing circles, not because he talks about what he did, but because word got around.
I ran into James a few months ago at an industry event. We briefly spoke. I told him he looks like he's in a much healthier place now. James smiled. Actually smiled, which was something I rarely saw when he worked for Trevor. Trevor probably thinks James got lucky, or that he's the victim of some vendetta. He'll never understand that he destroyed himself. James just documented it and made sure the right people saw.